Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. So in the last couple of months, we've had Brett Favre get caught stealing government money from black folks in Mississippi, Alec Baldwin has been busy making the world a better place, and Dana White has been beating his wife in public. Apparently, absconding with millions in government money is legal, not just in Mississippi, but nationwide. How many black people are sitting in prison right now for petty theft, if not mere accusations of theft? You've got banks being caught engaged in open theft and criminality, and not only does not one executive go to prison, but the government bails them out. Dana White has yet to face any consequences for beating his wife in public. Meanwhile, Kyrie Irving lost his shoe deal and who knows what other endorsements. He was suspended the whole nine, not for beating someone, not even for arguing with someone, but merely because of an Amazon link that he posted. And what exactly was Amazon's punishment for hosting such offensive material? Was there an advertiser exodus, perhaps? A boycott of sponsors? No, nothing happened. Amazon said they're not removing the movie in question, and the same white media who pretended to be all in a lather over Kyrie Irving said, "Okay, Amazon, that's fine." And that was that. They had nothing to say about Amazon. So when people ask why is it that Dana White is immune to punishment, it's for the same reason that Brett Favre is, and Alec Baldwin, who's been attacking people since at least the mid-90s, and nothing's been done about it, for the same reason the bank CEOs and executives and the guys at Amazon don't suffer any consequences. Because of white privilege. And let's be clear here, if Dana White had posted an Amazon link to the same movie that Kyrie did, would it even have become news? Of course not. Anti-black racists like Ari Emanuel, whose company has been embroiled in a number of sexual misconduct scandals, works both sides of the fence. How do you punish him when he represents so many of the actors, athletes, and even executives of these white media companies? Ari Emanuel doesn't merely represent white media figures, he owns white media entities. He was the one who made it a point to stir the pot and fan the flames of phony hysteria about Kanye West and Kyrie Irving. And absolutely nobody called him out on it. Except for the black media. Blatant hypocrisy on open display, and it's excruciatingly obvious who's driving it. Ari Emanuel was a one-man hate machine, not because he was so brilliant, not because this man was so insightful or irresistible, but because the white media wanted to help him push a narrative that they wanted out there. And ignoring the Dana Whites and the Brett Favres isn't some oversight, it's not some fluke. It's the entire point. The white media wants to make it clear there are certain people who are off limits, who they're not going to say anything about, and they want to tell you this openly. If you're black, you'll be attacked, demonized, and punished, not because you did anything wrong, but because you're black and that's the white media narrative. On the other hand, if you're not black, then no matter what you do, ripping off the state, beating your wife in public, shaking hands with Donald Trump because you think he'll give you a White House gig, you can do it and nobody will say boo about it. Rules don't apply. Unless you're black. Nobody in the white media is mentioning how odious Ari Emanuel is. They're giving him a wide berth, thank you, Mr. Harvey. The Women's Caucus of the California State Legislature has already sent a letter to Ari Emanuel telling him that he needs to fire Dana White. And nothing happens. Is anyone going to be saying that the UFC needs to be decertified from all of these states? You can't let these guys fight. I mean, look at who their boss is. We got to put pressure on them. Nope. The connections and associations between these cronies in the white media are absolutely incestuous. For example, did you know that Ari Emanuel represented Rachel Maddow in her contract dispute with MSNBC? He was the one who helped her get that deal where she gets $30 million a year to do a weekly show. So Rachel Maddow has no problem being represented by a man who was trying to become a Trump White House staffer. I want you to think about that the next time you see Rachel Maddow dressing down some Trump White House aide about the January 6th insurrection, or the next time you see her criticizing some pals of Trump because they don't have a problem with his behavior. And she's not alone. The reason the white media is ignoring Brett Favre isn't because he's no longer in the NFL. O.J. Simpson hadn't been in the NFL in years, and they made him the trial of the century. By the way, the original trial of the century was the Lindbergh baby kidnapping, but the white media was so desperate to make a black man the face of the crime of the century that they suddenly decided now there's going to be two trials of the century. The problem is racial privilege. The white media and the government have a hands-off policy for people with genetic immunity from law. You can rob the state, beat your wife on video, go after random strangers, even decide to cuss at and threaten your own child. And nobody's going to be doing a surviving Dana White series on Lifetime or a surviving Alec Baldwin series. No exposés by New York Magazine asking how many women Dana White's abused. Hannibal Buress did a comedy routine, which I'm convinced was done at the behest of some white supremacist figures in the background, to bring up phony accusations against Bill Cosby, and the white media immediately pounced on it. So fake. Since when has the white media ever decided to start a witch hunt based on a comedy routine? And since when do they start witch hunts based on a fourth-rate nobody like Hannibal Buress? This was clearly AstroTurf, not grassroots. But this staged hit job masquerading as a comedy show became the basis for the legal authorities to suddenly become obsessed with Bill Cosby. And once the Weinstein scandal broke, they became absolutely cross-eyed, fixated with finding any black man they could to drag in their media so they could try to get attention off of themselves. Well, in this case, we don't need some sock puppet punk who somebody may or may not have paid off to help us set up a witch hunt. We have the crime on video, in public. They can't even try to defend Dana White, so they're not even trying. Instead, they're saying, well, nothing's going to be done, nobody's interested in it, which means they're not interested in it, and that's that. Dana White's Slap League has debuted, and nobody's making a big deal of the cruel irony that Dana White was himself slapping his wife around. The mocking headlines aren't there. This isn't simply a matter of something flying under the radar. The white media is sweeping this one under the rug. They said it weeks ago that they don't want to report on this story, and they definitely don't want to report on Ari Emanuel. It's a cover-up, one that they're throwing in our faces, so we have to throw it in theirs. The same Ari Emanuel who lectured everyone that we can't be silent about Kanye's words has gone silent and been in hiding over Dana White's actions. The same Ari Emanuel who gave a ton of money to start Time's Up, which was, they claimed, meant to protect women, isn't lifting a finger or saying a word to protect women from Dana White. So on the one hand, we have a roided-up middle-aged punk who is a wife-beater, and on the other hand, a sleazy media power broker who's a hypocrite and enables wife-beating. Well, we're not going to let Dana White live this down. The white media doesn't get to say it's a non-issue. We have to make sure to remind people who Dana White is and who Ari Emanuel is. It's easy to be immune from consequences when the whole society is set up to overlook your wrongdoing. But we can make sure that whenever people see Dana White's name, they're going to be reminded of what he's done. We can make sure that whenever Brett Favre's name is mentioned, the first thing people see or hear is that he stole millions from the government that was supposed to be going to poor black people. And they did it through a rigged state program that the good old boys have on strings. We can make sure that whenever Endeavor is mentioned, the first thing that's asked is, why does Ari Emanuel protect thugs who abuse women? If they make it a point to smear black people with lies, we can make it a point to expose them with the truth. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Eve, Frederica Moore, Yamuka H., Mark Singleton, and Isaac. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.